put that out. Hello?
Anytime.
Hi, hey everybody. Dallas Winston. Sorry, caught me off guard there, snuck up on me. Once again, hi. What are we doing here? Bloody elbow?
Yeah, something like that.
Fight cards, face punching, UFC, a lot of it, 2 cards. UFN 53, Nelson Story from Stockholm, Sweden. And secondly, we're going to discuss Rory MacDonald versus Saffiedine at Ultimate Fight Night 54 from Nova Scotia. I'm joined by Zane Simon, Connor Rubish. Zane, say something exciting, exhilarating.
Damn it! Why does it?
That's
have
good.
To be...
That's good. That was perfect right there.
That's as exciting as we get.
Connor Rubish, our 80s music teacher. How are you?
I'm excellent. Very, very excellent. I was going to try to remain steely and silent like I did before the show began recording, and then I realized the way that Google Hangouts works, the camera wouldn't go to me, so it would just look like I didn't hear you.
If you had a big pair of glasses on, I think you'd look like Leonard Maltin, maybe, or like that guy from Inside the Actors Studio.
Oh, I'm searching for glasses right now because I really want to test your theory.
Or Gene Siskel or Robert Ebert, one of those two.
You see me banging shit around on my desk? I'm looking for glasses that I never wear. I don't have them. Let's talk about
Yeah,
UFC.
Let's talk about UFC. I thought you were going to say Ebola.
Yeah.
All right,
Let's talk about sex, baby.
There we go. There it is.
We're on a strict time something. You know, Kid Nate is...
Okay.
Sorry,
we only wish that people like to listen as much as we like to talk.
TV movie critic look here that he's got going.
All right, let's roll. I have no clever way to interrupt these guys, but I'm really inspired, motivated, and being forced to force the show along. So I'm gonna have to be Kid Nate today, kind of grouchy and crabby and cackly when I laugh, and abrasive, cynical, and rude, and unfriendly, and hairless.
Take that hat off, Chewy, and wear it. And then complain about how bald you are.
Yeah, you should have thrown in more things to make more insinuations about Nate. I'm gonna be just like Kid Nate today. You know, sexually perverse, abusive, violent, all the things that Kid Nate is.
Constantly dropping 40s and 50s references no one understands but Eugene S. Robinson.
That's accurate.
That's
all
right.
So you guys are gonna pretty much decide what you want to talk about and what you don't want to talk about, because there's just too much. It's too much. And I guess I'm not complaining. It's weird, still kind of weird to me that the UFC wants to do 2 shows on the same day. But hey, we got a shitload of MMA, so life could be worse. We are going to start with Nelson versus Story. Stockholm, Sweden. The preliminary card is on UFC Fight Pass. It begins at 12:10. That's noon 10 Eastern. First up is Ernest. I am going to really fuck up a lot of names today, so I hope everybody sits back and just enjoys that. It's a specialty of mine. Ernest Chavez versus Zubera Tugukov.
It's Tugukov, I think.
It's exactly what I said, Connor.
Kind of like Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Bless you. Go, Ernest Chavez. You're up. You just nominated yourself.
This is an okay fight, I guess. Tugukov is a guy that looked like he had a lot of potential coming into the UFC. It didn't quite pan out. He kind of is one of those guys who knows how to throw fun stuff, but doesn't really understand how those techniques should be integrated into a larger game. So he is kind of I don't know. He kind of runs out of ideas shortly into the fight. After 3 or 4 spinning back kicks, and he's like, well, I guess I'll try that again, even if it didn't really work. He's a solid fighter. I mean, he's got a decent sense of timing and everything, but just doesn't have the fundamentals you need to really make the kind of things he wants to do happen on a technical level. Ernest Chavez, I actually thought he looked okay in his last fight. I was really not anticipating his debut, and he was surprisingly stalwart and tough against Yazdena Cedeno in his UFC debut. In his last fight, he came in very, very different. Looked like he'd really worked on improving technically and threw some nice counterpunches. And he's also the kind of guy who's definitely willing to stick to a game plan. He will grind and go until he gets it down to the ground. So I'm going to go with Ernest Chavez here in this of the first fights of the Nelson Story card.
Beautifully timed, my friend. Zane Simon, go.
I kind of, I don't know, I feel like I'm on the very other opposite end of this from Connor here. I think Tukugov, I mean, he's a young guy. He's got a lot of experience under his belt, but he's only been fighting for a few years. He definitely seems to have that sort of combat sambo skill set of, maybe not being as technically proficient as some of the other practitioners in there, but the ability to throw some kind of wild strikes and then have the grappling and wrestling to back it up and control the fight. So that, I mean, even if his fight against Douglas De Silva didn't end up being particularly impressive, it was still a pretty dominantly one-sided win for him. And Chavez is a guy who, like, I don't know, he has a game plan of boxing and all that, and a high movement, high output boxing game, but I don't think he has the athleticism to pull it off. So I kind of worry about him wilting. So I got to go with Tukugov here.
And the betting odds are on Zane Simon's side. Tugukov, say his name again.
Tukugov
is favored minus 240 to minus 260, with Chavez coming in around plus 200 as the underdog. Up next is Marcin Bandel. There's like 7 different possible names in my mind. Versus Mairbek Taisimov. Zane Simon, what'd it do?
This is definitely a make or break fight for Taisimov, I think, in the UFC. He came in with a lot of hype behind him out of his camp, which is headed up by what's his name? The former Sports Illustrated cover boy. From way back in the day. Roger Huerta. Roger Huerta was really like big on him, said, "Oh, this guy's gonna be a future champ," and he fought an okay fight against Tai-Hun Bang, but then he just got totally outworked by Mikel Pezares, who's a pretty good fighter, but the kind of guy that if you're gonna be a future champ, you should be beating Mikel Pezares. And Bandel's sort of a throwback grappler, the kind of guy who's gonna come in and just like dive on a heel hook, dive on a knee bar, transition from grappling attack to grappling attack. Very aggressive, very fun. I'd pick Taisimov to win this. He's probably he's got a better skill set for a higher level, but Bandel could come out and just grab his knee and twist it off.
Boxing Bush.
Taisimov strikes me as being very similar to that last guy we talked about. Who was up before this?
Tukugov.
Yeah, as being similar to Tukugov. That seems like I was play acting, but I genuinely forgot what we were talking about. I think I fell asleep for a moment thinking about some of these matchups. He's the same way. Likes to throw fun things, has some flashy moves, but like I said, he just kind of like runs out of ways to use them and doesn't really. It's like the same thing we see from a lot of Winklejohn fighters. Like, I'm going to throw a lot of stuff, but like if the sheer element of surprise doesn't work, I don't really know how else to make it happen. Marcin Bandel, I guess, is like he fits the rule of don't let Polish guys named Marcin grab your legs, like Marcin Held in Bellator, who will just snap your foot off at the ankle and take it home with him. The only difference is that Bandel is nowhere near as good as Held at getting the takedown and controlling in top position. He's more of like a just go for wild, risky techniques grappler. And even if you watch his highlights of some of his best wins, you see him getting battered while he goes for people's legs. So I think that Taisimov is more than good enough to stop Bandel from ever really getting into his game, and I think he'll pretty easily be able to outwork him here. So I'm going with Taisimov.
Quick point: Taisimov and Tukugov actually do train out of the same camp. So
there you go. They strike me as similar styled fighters, or a similar approach to fighting.
And they're both obviously of Mexican descent. Taisimov is the favorite, minus 190 to 200, minus 200 that is. Bandel, an underdog to the tune of plus 160-ish across the board. Up next, Thor Troeng versus Christoph Jotko. I don't know whose turn it is, so somebody take the initiative. Huh?
Connor.
Was that you volunteering me?
Yeah.
Thor Troeng, Watch him fight because it's always fun. Zane said before we began that he doesn't really seem to be improving, which I think is probably genuinely true. But
What
I think
happens in the locker room stays in the locker room, Connor.
I'm so sorry, Zane, for throwing you under the bus like that. I was saying before
that kind of show. Guess that's where we are today.
I was saying before we started recording, I'll just take credit for it, that Troeng doesn't really seem to be improving. But I think that Troeng is the kind of fighter who cannot ever improve from where he's at right now and still be a tough out for most fighters. I think he kind of tends to. It's basically a proven certain fact that he fights to the level of his competition at this point, which means he can look really competitive with like the worst person on the UFC roster or with some of the best people in this division. So I don't know, Krzysztof Jotko, he surprised a lot of people by out-grappling Bruno Santos. I think he's a pretty solid fighter, and he had a pretty close contest with Magnus Seidenblad in his last time out before getting snapped up in Seidenblad's absolutely murderous guillotine. So I like Troeng. This is a really tough fight to call. It's essentially a toss-up, the way I see it. Jotko can grapple. Jotko can strike relatively well. Troeng is not afraid to go for all kinds of risky things. I'm going to go with Troeng. I think Troeng will surprise Jotko at some point later in the fight with a submission because he's very crafty with his setups, even if he does go for things that nobody in high-level MMA should be so riskily going for. But I'm going to go with Troeng.
Yeah, I think I agree, except that I don't know. My outlook on Jotko is that he's really a guy who he's controlling, and that's like his main skill is that he's controlling. Like he's big and he can control the fight. In a lot of ways, he's a lot like Bruno Santos in that way, where it's just like yes, and what else do you do? I watch him fight, and it's it's like, oh, he's got him down, and he's holding him there, and that's where we are. And I actually thought Bruno Santos might have won that fight against him. So it's hard for me to really feel high on him. I think Troeng's a lot more aggressive with his attempts to actually finish the fight and get a submission and get strikes and that kind of aggression. It'll all come down to whether or not he can be physically controlled by Jotko. Because Jotko is young, he's got a lot of room to improve, he's got a lot of time to improve. And he's actually, I think, I'm seeing that he may have switched over to training out of TriStar lately, so he could be really putting something together. I'd probably pick him to win this fight just because I do think that Troeng fights down to the level of his opponent and really doesn't seem to be showing the same promise lately that he had earlier in his career. But he could come out and win this if he can fight aggressively and maintain that in a smart way.
So is your final pick, Jotko?
Jotko.
It's a tight one on the betting lines. Both fighters in the negative. Thor Troeng around -104 to -115. Jotko -105 to -115, so almost dead even on the betting lines. Next up, Cathal Pendred versus Ghassan, the cocktail, Umalatov. What, that's fucking clever. That was clever as shit. No one ever could have thought of that. Connor, say something witty.
Ghassan, the cocktail, Umalatov.
That was fucking witty. Well done, my friend.
Yeah. I am not interested in this fight because Ghassan Umalatov is in it. What more is there to say, really? I guess Cathal Pendred's the reason to care about this fight, but Pendred hasn't exactly looked great. He's looked tough as nails, like he's absolutely unkillable. And his last fight could have been justifiably stopped several times before his remarkable comeback win. He's like like Boxcar Homer, right? He's just gonna like take a bajillion punches and then you get really tired and then he'll knock you out, or in his case he'll submit you. But the taking a million punches part is not exactly great. That being said, I don't know what Umalatov can really do to beat Pendred. I don't think Umalatov's very impressive as a fighter. He had a completely underwhelming fight with possibly the worst version of Paulo Thiago I've ever seen, and couldn't really do anything to Thiago. So until he shows really serious signs of improving from a technical and strategic standpoint, I just really can't pick Umalatov against somebody like Cathal Pendred, who, despite his lapses does belong in the UFC. So, Cathal Pendred?
It's a cynical bunch today. Audience, fans,
Nah.
everything. High standards. Zane, your thoughts, my friend.
Well, unfortunately, I think Umalatov is kind of coming to the UFC at the peak of his ability, so I don't know that him getting a lot better is a big thing. He's got a decent combination boxing game. It's not a powerful one at all, and otherwise he's just basically purely a positional grinder, wall and stall, inside dirty boxing, and that's pretty much Umalatov. Pendred should be able to win this. He's the superior athlete. I do think that his fight with Mike King was essentially watching Nikita Krylov fight Nikita Krylov, except at middleweight.
Cynical bunch.
Sounds amazing.
Cynical bunch.
And it was amazing. I mean, we remember that fight. That fight was amazing. But Pendred, I kind of like, it's like, oh, SBG Ireland has, it's like they've got all this amazing technically gifted fighters they're producing, and Cathal Pendred. He's kind of the odd man out there, where it just doesn't seem like he's picking up any technical skill to go with his great athleticism and iron will. Although, still, this is his fight to lose, and he'll win it.
For sure.
Betting odds are in line with that. Minus 140 for Pendred, while the cocktail is an underdog, but not by too much. Plus 120 across the board. Next up, the return of Russian-German kickboxer Dennis Siver versus Charles Rosa. Zane Simon.
This is just going to be a slaughter. Dennis Siver he's getting a really easy softball here just because of a late notice injury to Robert Whiteford. Whiteford might have been kind of competitive against him as a judoka who's pretty rock solid, even if he's not exceptional as a striker. But Rosa is a tentative kickboxer who likes to pull guard, and Siver's more these days than anything else. He's just a top control monster. I mean, that's really his game now, is just get on top and grind and land ground and pound and be incredibly heavy. And a guy who's willing to dive in and try to pull guard for arm bars is just not going to make that fight happen.
Is this at featherweight?
Yeah.
Kind of rubish. I have to agree with everything that Zane said. Siver, this is where these fight night cards start to really remind you of like a Friday Night Fights kind of deal on ESPN when you're watching boxing. Namely that there are 2, if not more, fights on the same day. As a fan, you are not expected to watch all of them. They are really there to fill out the card for the live audience and to let these guys build records. And you see guys, you basically, with a lot of Friday Night Fight cards, you'll say, oh, I know so-and-so's name, and you have no idea who his opponent is, but if you're interested in watching that guy fight, you tune in to watch. And so that's what this is. Like, if you want to watch Dennis Siver fight, you'll tune in to watch Dennis Siver fight. Who's he fighting? Doesn't matter. I'm a Dennis Siver fan. That's basically the reason this matchup was made. Charles Rosa doesn't belong in there with Siver. Dennis Siver, maybe Charles Rosa could have beaten Dennis Siver like 15 years ago, like 15 fights ago, when Siver was getting submitted and was purely a kickboxer, but he's a beast of a grappler now. He's a nightmare to have on top of you, and he's not really going to end the fight from top position, but he is going to completely wear you out. He's just very difficult to deal with on the ground, and he's clearly a better kickboxer than Rosa. So enough talking about this matchup. It's an obvious win for Dennis Siver. I will be very, very surprised if Charles Rosa is even competitive.
Kind of rubish, directing anger at the UFC as a smokescreen for not studying Charles Rosa intently. Betting odds actually aren't too bad on this one. Siver's obviously the favorite, minus 260 to a low of minus 240, and Rosa's at about plus 200. This next one should actually be a good one. Alexander Yakovlev versus Nico Musoke. Connor, do your thing.
Zane takes this one first. Zane, take this one first.
All right, I'll take it. I really like this fight just because I really like Alexander Yakovlev. Honestly, I like watching him fight. He's a fun dude. He's not like he's one of those guys that has come into the UFC after a long career at the peak of their ability and has a very complete game. and he might go win-loss, 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 but he's the kind of guy who can be immediately competitive with the upper 20, upper half, upper third of the division. And he's got very sharp, solid, especially defensively solid kickboxing, which is more important, I think, than anything else when you're going to be fighting at a reasonably high level. And he couples that with great technical wrestling and top control. He's still not very good. He's not a great submission grappler, and he's not good when he gets stuck on the bottom. That's really his bad point. But his striking is perfectly tuned to his wrestling game, and that just kind of meshes really well. Of course, Musoke is a defensive liability on the feet, but he's sort of like Cathal Pendred in that you're like, you see it and you're like, well, there's a lot of technical gaps missing, but man, is this guy tough. Like, he's just going to wade in there and take all sorts of punishment and get beat up and then suddenly snatch victory out of nowhere. I don't think he can beat Yakovlev. I think Yakovlev is technically just too skilled and too tough, and so I got to go with Yakovlev here.
Connor, agree, disagree?
I don't know that I like Musoke's chances enough to disagree. I think he might have been a little undersold there, because I think while he has his defensive holes in the feet, I think he's also pretty offensively potent on the feet.
Housekeeping.
Somebody knocking somewhere. He packs a pretty serious punch, and he's not afraid to stand in the pocket and trade. He had some decent success against Kelvin Gastelum, particularly early in that fight. I think the fact that he faded after getting beat up and really stopped having success is what really troubles him here against Yakovlev. Yakovlev is a guy who will stay in the fight the entire time. He's got endurance, and he's not afraid to just keep trying until something works. And when he does find something that works, he's not the kind of guy who's liable to not notice. You know what I mean? If he finds something that's effective, he catches on and he sticks with it. So I do agree that Yakovlev has a good chance here, but this is a pretty compelling matchup, and I think Musoke came across pretty well against Gastelum, who is probably one of the most naturally gifted guys on the UFC's roster right now.
Betting odds are surprisingly slanted, in my opinion, at least, with Musoke being a favorite, minus 200 to minus 215, and Yakovlev between plus 167 and plus 180. Is it me, or is it? I would give Yakovlev a lot better chance. I almost look at this as even. Yeah? No?
Yeah, I would say Yakovlev should be the favorite. I mean, this is somebody who survived 3 rounds with Damian Maia on top of him. So, if Musoke's best chance is a submission win, his chances of getting that are pretty slim.
Yeah, and I mean, do you guys think Musoke's got the takedown defense? Because doesn't Yakovlev have his judo background?
Judo
and Greco, maybe?
No, well, he's got a Master of Sport and Freestyle Wrestling and Judo and like Combat Sambo.
Okay, so we're now moving on to the last fight on the Fight Pass preliminary card. Magnus Sedenblad versus Scott Askham. You don't know who he is? Just ask him. Connor, do it.
You really are taking the cue from Kid Nate when it comes to
and I'm all
these programs.
Before that, though, I'm all monotone and robotic about it. I'm like, yes, thank you, Shane. You go. Thanks.
You're just, even the jokes they're just kind of fitting puzzle pieces into the formula. If you don't know who he is, just ask him. Connor, to you.
That's why I'm paid handsomely for my position.
I kind of see this fight as being a walkover. I don't know. Askham, for a guy who tends to kind of like to stall against the fence and stay on the feet, and he's not really a very dynamic striker. I mean, I watched the one that sticks out in my mind is his last Bama defense, his Bama title fight against Max Nunes, and he basically just there was not a single jab thrown in the entire fight. You know what I mean? It was like this. It was like the most depressing thing to watch as a fan of striking and also a fan of MMA, because these two guys were just. And the thing is that it wasn't even Askham who was leading with power shots. It was his opponent who was like trying to try 2 threes and stuff. Askham was kind of just waiting until he could get Nunes against the fence, and then he would like try to hit him with knees. He's got a decent clinch game there against the fence. He's got a pretty good control against the fence. He's pretty heavy on top, but Blad is really coming into his own, and I think he's just a very dangerous opportunist. I think we saw that in his last fight. He's got a terrifying guillotine. I mean, Blad's got the kind of guillotine you find your head locked up. It's very, very unlikely that you're going to escape, because he's very good at making those tiny adjustments you need to make a headlock choke work. So even if he doesn't get it immediately, he's going to scoot his hips around, he's going to inch his arm in, and slowly he's going to sink that choke in. And if he gets it right away, as we saw in his last fight against Jotko, it's a very quick tap. It's a tight choke, because I think that submission happened with like a second left in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
It happened at the buzzer, and it was so tight that even having heard the clackers and everything, Jotko still didn't even think of waiting for the buzzer to go or for the horn to blow. He tapped to once he felt the pressure. So
I'm hearing the clackers right now.
I like Blad in this fight, you dickhead. Zane, to you.
Yeah, I thought we set up before that there were 2 fights we were going to talk a bunch about, and now we got Dallas sitting here just like pouncing like a little angry cat.
This is what you get, Dallas. If you want to be Kid Nate, you get hated like Kid Nate.
That's right.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm the biggest dick to Nate out of anybody, so I'll take it. But either way, you guys are, quit jabbing around. Shut the fuck up. Fighting. What goes on? Zane Simon.
Okay, so I think, Phil McKenzie, one of our writers, probably nailed it when he talked about Scott Askham. He called him Scott Ultra Tom Uber Watson Askham. And that's kind of how he fights. Like,
that is absolutely a perfect fucking comparison. He's like a Michael Bisping without like the athleticism and speed. It's just like this slow, awkward, and it has the stiffness that Michael Bisping has, but without the the technical acumen.
But it's also like, I mean, it's all his game plan, and I think it's a game plan that can work, especially in a middleweight division that has a lot of really uber, just bland fighters, just guys that you're just like, what do you do? He has this grind and all this cardio to just grind through a fight, and then late just sort of turn it up in the clinch and just start to really punish guys who will get forced into late fights because they can't finish him because he's tough as nails. I mean, that's actually a pretty solid game plan for MMA, quite frankly. The problem is that, I do think Blad possesses a big problem. If Askham can get taken down and his wrestling isn't particularly great, then Blad is just kind of a beast on the ground. I think this could be a very fun fight either way. I think, Askham's tough, and if he can survive a little, he could really make Blad work. But Blad will probably take a win over Askham, even if he's a pretty good young prospect.
Connor, how do you find out if he's tough? Ask him. How do you find out? Never mind. Blad's a favorite, minus 155 to minus 160. Askham is the underdog, plus 135-ish, pretty much as an average. Now we are moving on to the main card. Still on UFC Fight Pass. 3 o'clock Eastern. We're going to start out with Nicholas Backstrom versus Mike Wilkinson. Zane Simon. Who are these ninjas?
I feel so bad for Mike Wilkinson. This is just like, this isn't fair. This isn't a nice fight. This is just watching him get destroyed by a very, very talented prospect. I can't honestly, even picturing Mike Wilkinson, I can't even, tell you how he fights. He's just, the most nondescript British MMA dude.
You're going to Google him right now for your fight analysis? Mike Wilkinson.
I just have to remember who he fought last. And it was Hani Jason who choked him out in a round.
In a minute and a half.
Yeah, in a minute and a half. And I mean, Hani Jason's good and all, but Nicholas Backstrom is basically a much more athletic and dynamic version of Hani Jason. and mostly, centered around a great kicking game from distance. But he's a very confident striker and a really scrappy wrestler and scrambler, and then his just submission game is monstrous. So Wilkinson probably, much like his fight with Jason, gets subbed well inside the first round.
Kind of rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, Wilkinson's fought some decently experienced guys over there on the British and Irish MMA scene, but the thing is like you can. Britain is this weird MMA environment where you can compile a pretty solid record against guys whose records also look pretty solid and yet never really fight the kind of people that you're going to need to beat to prove yourself in the UFC. You can fight a lot of guys who are just kind of, they lean against people on the fence and they're underwhelming strikers and they're okay at jiu-jitsu. And they just don't have any of those outstanding qualities that UFC fighters tend to have. If you're in the UFC, even in this new era of this complete saturation, you still have guys in the UFC who tend to have something that they're good at. They're either really athletic, so they make everything work together, or they're really good at one thing, and it fills in the gaps in the rest of their game. And with a lot of these guys that Wilkinson has gotten his experience against, his previously undefeated record against, are guys who are just kind of there. Like, they're not athletic enough to make their all-round game impressive, and they're not skilled enough in one area to be exciting specialists. And we have Nicholas Backstrom, who is the exact opposite of that kind of fighter. He is an absolutely terrifying specialist with his opportunistic submissions, and he's surprisingly crafty on the feet. As Zane said, he's good with his knees and his kicks. He fights like a tall fighter should. He's got some defensive liabilities, but he's also very tough. He's got a great chin, and he, as we saw against Ninyamaki, he can take a shot to give one. And I mean, this is the kind of guy I'm thinking of, like Dudu Dantas' submission in Bellator. Who did Eduardo Dantas had? Somebody was on a
Anthony
single leg.
Leone.
Yes,
Yeah,
Leone had a single leg on Dudu, and he just basically hopped over his shoulder and locked in a rear naked choke off of that. That's the kind of transition that Backstrom...
Sorry to interrupt you, but didn't Jonesy first do that against Shogun, although he didn't choke him out immediately afterwards, I don't think.
Maybe.
It was like... Yeah, it was badass. He like jumped backwards over him.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was right at the end of a round, I believe.
Just
probably.
saying.
He probably did that. I don't know. Jones has probably done a lot of fun things that I don't remember.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it. But
don't take it so personally, Connor. It was just an
it's my time to talk, Dallas. Okay, just let me have
for
this moment.
5 more seconds. It is.
Backstrom is this kind of guy who is an opportunistic submission artist whose opportunities are not too risky to go for in MMA. We have a lot of guys who just jump on crazy guard pulls and stuff like that, and they never succeed in the UFC. Backstrom, his opportunities are usually ones where he'll find a creative way to get to the back, or a creative way to lock up a submission from standing, creative ways to submit opponents without completely compromising his own position defensively. So I'm really excited to see Backstrom continue to develop, and he should probably murder Mike Wilkinson within a round.
So Backstrom is the biggest favorite in the card, although surprisingly a couple fights ahead, Max Holloway will challenge him for that. Minus 650 to minus 750. Wilkinson is the hefty underdog to the tune of plus 501 to plus 559.
You don't really have to bring his weight into it.
That's fine. Hey, is this the UFC debut for Jan Blachowicz?
Yes, it is.
All right, he's a solid fighter. We have Alir Latifi versus Jan Blachowicz. Anyone want to take this one?
Zane does.
Okay, I'll take it. Yeah, Blachowicz is one of those guys that I wish he'd gotten to the UFC a lot earlier. He still has time to be a pretty good fighter there. But he's definitely kind of at the height of his career right now, so it's sort of now suddenly, instead of being a fighter to grow in the UFC, he's in a now or never kind of position in the UFC. And he's a guy who's, unfortunately got that classic sort of, I guess it's almost more of a classic Brazilian skill set now, but it's also a pretty classic European skill set of like a great kickboxer and a great bottom submission game, and none of the tools that go in between those two things. And
He's all right in the clinch, though, wouldn't you say? I mean, I think you're saying he's not a strong takedown artist, but he's not.
he's not a strong takedown artist. He has no takedown defense, and he has no wrestling skill on the ground really to speak of. He may
Solid
have
clinch, though.
Yeah, he has some good knees, but I don't know that he's like a great dirty boxer or anything like that, to my recollection. But he's a very good kickboxer. Quite honestly, just like technically decently sound. You know, is not he gets a little off balance, but at light heavyweight, I mean, that's a division that doesn't have a lot of technically sound kickboxers. Unfortunately for him, Ilir Latifi is exactly the kind of guy who's just going to wreck him. Somebody who has enough power to make him stand up straight and defend and put his hands up, and then has the kind of double leg to go in behind it and just push him to the floor and lock up a submission and be nasty. So I kind of expect Latifi to get Blachowicz out of there and be a real tough first fight for him.
Connor Rubish, agree, disagree?
I tend to agree. I think that we'll probably see Blachowicz experience the same difficulties he did against Sokoju when he fought Sokoju a few fights ago, except instead of Latifi capitalizing on those opportunities with leg kicks, he's going to capitalize with takedown attempts. And Latifi is not necessarily a guy with a great shot or anything, but like even if he gets in on your hips, he's just an absolute horse, you know what I mean? He's just got insane physical strength. Most of his chokes are really just like, I'm smashing your neck, and if you want to keep your head on your shoulders, you'll tap. It's not really technical jiu-jitsu acumen, which Blachowicz does have. He's like the Eastern European Carlos Condit or Donald Cerrone. You know, he's in that mold, as Zane pointed out, of guys with good jiu-jitsu. He's even got good sweeps, and he's pretty scary on the top. So it's not like he never gets top position, but he has to get taken down before he can get it. And Latifi is not the kind of guy to easily get swept. He's very heavy, and I don't know. I like Blachowicz, but I think this is a pretty rough matchup for him. Isn't it weird how Latifi's actually gained serious name recognition because of that horrible drubbing he took at the hands of Musashi?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's also one of those things where he honestly is one of the talented up-and-coming light heavyweights. Like, that division is that thin that he's a pretty talented guy on the rise. And his breakout debut just had to be, like, the worst possible opportunity in the world to do that.
And he's a good incentive for fighters who sometimes are offered a late notice fight in the UFC, which can be the worst thing for your career. But in this case, he took that worst case scenario. He didn't get destroyed, but now I think he's getting the chance to shine in doing so.
Yeah. Is Gustafsson healed from his injury? Is he back in training, or is he still on the bench?
I have no idea. I have to assume. I think that it sounds like they're trying to book him. I mean, I think they were. There was a talk that they were going to book Johnson Gustafsson.
That's right. They were going to book it before the end of the year, right?
Yeah, before the end of the year. So I got to think.
My thought is that if sorry to cut you off, Zane, but my thought is that if Latifi is going to be preparing for Blachowicz, then Gustafsson is basically the exact kind of training partner you would want to have to prepare for that style.
That's a good point. In this one, sorry to cut you off, Connor, but there's going to be a big height difference, 5'8" for Latifi and 6'2" for Blachowicz. And I think in this situation, it actually favors the smaller guy with all the power because Blachowicz doesn't have, I don't think, the striking venom to use range striking to win the fight. I don't think he can put Latifi out that way.
He has the venom, but he doesn't have the footwork, and he stands up really tall.
Mm-hmm.
So.
He doesn't have, I want to say for a striker, he has very few finishes by strikes. Is that just me?
Yeah, he probably doesn't. He doesn't have many, but he does have power. I mean, he's got a good snapping head kick, and he can throw some things with power. It's just mostly he stands up real tall, and his footwork isn't great. And I think he's the kind of guy who like hurts you and then submits you.
And against like a little beer keg shaped guy who's pretty fairly explosive with his hands and with his level changes, I think that's going to be a bad situation for him. But Latifi is the favorite, -240 to -260. Blachowicz isn't doing too bad, plus 210 to plus 205. We are actually 1 minute away and 2 fights away from being exactly on time. Just a little reminder there. Next up, Akira Corassani versus... Did Holloway just fight, or am I making that up?
He did. He's filling in here.
Who did he just fight?
He fought Clay Collard.
Yeah,
Right,
Cassius Clay Collard.
Cassius Clay Collard.
Cassius. This used to be my cat's name. Either way, Holloway Corassani. I'm kind of surprised at the betting lines here, but who wants this one first?
That's Connor.
I'm a little troubled that Max Holloway is taking this fight on such short notice, but that's exactly the kind of fighter he is. It's the reason you love him and also the reason you're afraid to root for him as a potential, you know what I mean? You're afraid to root for him getting a title run because he's just going to take these kind of huge risks. Corassani is... Why were you surprised at the betting lines? I'm curious to know before I get into this. Is Holloway a big favorite?
Yeah, minus 700 to minus 600, and I am not afraid to root for him.
That really, really shocks me. I think Holloway should be the favorite here, but I really don't think he should be that big of a favorite. Corassani is not a walkover fight. He's crafty. Again, he's the kind of guy who kind of fights to the level of his competition, not in the, much like Troeng. Like he's still going to be competitive with good fighters, but he's also going to be competitive with fighters less than him. So it can sometimes sell him as being less good than he is. But Max Holloway's coming in on short notice. Not only that, but the dude lives in Hawaii and he's flying to Sweden for this fight. So, some of those things don't often get discussed, but like making that travel just after having finished another camp, and Holloway is a tall, skinny kid. He's young, so it's probably easy for him to cut the weight, but I'm sure it's not that easy to be able to do that. I'm reminded immediately of Chaz Skelly, who just took his fight against Tom Niinamaki. What was it, like 2 or 3 weeks after having another fight, and he still won, but he said immediately, he had to be walked out of the
Sean
arena.
Soriano he took the fight with after.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, but that's gangster.
He beat Niinamaki, and then he fought Soriano, and he had to be helped to even stay on his feet leaving the arena. He was so drained. Granted, Skelly is a much bigger, more solidly built fighter for his division than Holloway is for his, but that still poses some trouble, I think. Holloway is also younger than Skelly, so I think he's, you know what I mean? It's easier for him to cut that weight. He's what is he, like 22?
Yeah, he's 22.
So,
Connor, are you reading my facial expressions as you talk?
I'm trying, Dallas.
Okay. Well, you shouldn't. I don't mean to disrupt you.
They're inscrutable. I'm trying to discern what they really mean. I don't know, Dallas. I feel distracted now for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know why. I'm such a nice host. Sorry about that.
I totally got to pick Holloway here. Holloway's really come into his own in terms of style. He's very, very good at making these sudden stance switches and catching you with counters from angles you don't expect. He's very, very dynamic. He's got surprisingly good defense, and even when he doesn't avoid the counter shot that's coming his way, he's aware of it, so he's very difficult to hurt even when he's in a wild exchange. He's got very good vision when he's in the pocket. So, of course, I like Holloway in this fight, but those reasons to doubt the short notice, the repeat weight cuts, the long distance of travel, those make me think that Corassani might be a smart place to put a small bet in this fight.
Yeah, that kind of odds that you're talking about, that kind of spread, that's pretty ridiculous.
Like, it can't hurt you to put half a unit, something like that on Corassani at those kind of odds.
Well, and Connor, sorry for jumping in and first interrupting you and now interrupting Zane, but I made that funny face which took us on that tangent because I think, isn't Chaz Skelly kind of built like Holloway, kind of real tall and thin? But either way, it doesn't matter. Much respect to Chaz Skelly, too, for that.
He's more solid. He's tall, but he's also more solidly built. Holloway is really just tall.
Another way you could look at it is Skelly uses a lot of his clinch and grappling and physical strength, where Holloway uses more footwork and striking.
Holloway's got a style where if he needs to rest, he will be able to take that time to rest. You know what I mean? If he needs to dance around for a round and recover, he will. So that's a boon for him.
Zane, did you talk about this fight yet, or has it just been
I have not.
droning on? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's all you, Dallas. It's all you. But
it's all you, my man.
Anyway, the thing that just struck me, actually, looking into this fight a little more, is that for both of these fighters, this would probably be the best win of their career. Weirdly. I mean, you could argue Andre Fili, but Fili hasn't really accomplished all that much to date. I mean, he's got some good potential. But other than that, I mean, Akira Corassani's going to be the best fighter that Max Holloway's ever beat. And for Corassani, it would easily be the same if he beats Holloway. The difference, I definitely think that Corassani, I mean, he's just such a, like, I think the big problem for me is that Holloway's so hard to hurt striking, and that's basically what Corassani does. Corassani's basically a boxer. He's so hard to hurt striking, and Corassani is so easy to just drain all of his confidence away. The moment he gets hurt, he wilts. And that's the big thing, is that you know Holloway's going to stay in, he's going to stay in the pocket, he's going to move, he's going to exchange and mix it up with Corassani all fight, and the moment he hurts Corassani, he's going to stay on him and jump on him and look to finish, and Corassani's very likely going to wilt. So I got to take Holloway here. I think it's a much closer fight than the odds are giving it. Corassani's easily, at the very least, he's the most technical striker that Holloway will have ever beaten. But
to Holloway's credit, I think his competitive loss to Conor McGregor looks even better now in retrospect than it did at the time.
Oh, that's what I was just going to say. I had to double check Zane there, but really Holloway has the respect he has in defeat, between Conor McGregor and Dennis Bermudez.
I mean, I'm not saying Conor or Holloway isn't a good fighter. I'm saying he hasn't. Whenever he's taken a step up in competition, he hasn't won those fights.
I got you.
And this is the opportunity for him to do that. And Corassani's a very beatable fighter, but Corassani would also be the biggest technical win on his career.
In Corassani, whoever called him crafty, I think that was you, Zane. That's a good description for him, because in every fight, he at least shows me something that's a little bit creative, a little bit scrappy. So, big favorite, Holloway, -700 to -600, and Corassani is an underdog, big, plus 425, all the way up to plus 500. So I would agree with Connor. It kind of depends on your taste, but I always call them chance bets. If you just have a couple dollars, like who gives a shit money to throw at that, it's not a bad payout. All right, we're going to move on to the main event, and this will be a good one. Gunnar Nelson versus Rick Story. Who wants it?
I'll start. This is, I mean, it's very fitting, but it's kind of sad for me to see like Rick Story being the litmus test for the top 15, top 20 of the division. He's very much become the guy you beat on your way up, and it's good. He's a solid veteran with a very real ceiling who's gained a lot of savvy over his time. And I think Nelson's exactly the kind of guy to beat him. I mean, Story, he's not a great striker still. He's gotten better at sort of picking his shots and knowing when to come in and trade with power. But he's still very easy to take off his striking game. I mean, he needed all of about a minute of trading with Leonardo Mafra to realize that he should really just be wrestling, at which point, a minute, he submitted him in the second round. So he definitely has enough savvy to sort of realize where his strengths need to be in a fight. But Nelson's just, I think, he's a little ahead, not way ahead in the striking. That could be pretty even for a while. But his grappling and wrestling are just so crafty and so ahead. I don't know that he'll submit Story. There's a very real chance, but I think this is probably just a submission win for Nelson, in which he proves himself to be a little better the whole way through, sort of like the Gastelum fight.
I get the feeling Connor is going to paint a better picture for Rick Story. Yes, no?
Absolutely. Dallas and we've talked about Rick Story before. I think we're both pretty big fans of Rick Story, actually. He's actually he's got problems, I think, more mental than physical when it comes to tough fights, because I really think that Story is some of the most technical boxing in the division. He's got very sharp hands. He's one of the few guys I know who actually has a good grasp of how to use head movement. When he slips and somebody misses a punch, he's always liable to come right back with a strike. And I think he's got a decent chance here against Nelson, both on the feet and with his wrestling. I think this is a more competitive matchup than most people will probably have it. I suspect the odds are pretty wide in Nelson's favor, which is not really a surprise. But Story's got the southpaw style. He's a southpaw who's not afraid to use his jab. He's got good straight punches. He slips and counters, and he'll mix it up and throw takedowns. And he's also got some heavy kicks. We saw that against Brian Ebersol. Did he fight Brian Ebersol recently?
Yeah, he did.
And he blasted him with kicks to the body and legs. And I see that being pretty effective against Gunnar Nelson. I don't know. I just thought Nelson didn't exactly look amazing against Zach Cummings. I think that's a credit to Zach Cummings, who is better than most people give him credit for. He's a pretty dangerous guy, but Story is basically Cummings except better. He doesn't have Cummings' submission acumen, but in terms of his striking style, he's just a better southpaw boxer who occasionally throws a big left kick to the body. Whereas, I still can't get the image of Gunnar Nelson closely getting by Jorge Santiago out of my head. That fight, I guess most people saw as like a dominant win because Nelson landed the more telling big shots. So when he did land, it was big, but Santiago was lighting him up, and he was way too willing to stand in there and rely on his chin, and didn't really have any head movement. He looked like this whatever 3.0 incarnation of
Godzilla.
Yeah, he looked like Godzilla. Whereas I'd prefer he looked like Godzilla in 1998. I like that one better. Man, who am I thinking of? Who's the karate guy with the crescent kick? I'm just blanking on everything.
Katsuri Kikuno.
Yeah, like Kikuno, where it's like, you have a sweet karate pose, but why don't you do something out of it? Sometimes Nelson is just like, he looks really cool standing there with his hands down and his chin in the air. Why isn't he moving his head every time a punch comes directly at his chin? Why doesn't it just seems like a pose rather than a usable stance? So that being said, Nelson is a very, very crafty, underrated wrestler. His submission game and his jiu-jitsu game in general is obviously awesome. And the best thing we saw in his last two fights were his ground and pound. His striking on the ground to set up submissions is really pretty terrifying. He hits heavy and accurate elbows and punches from top position. I don't doubt that he will get top position against Story. For all of his wrestling ability, Story has never been that great defensively. So I think Story stands to give Nelson a good fight. I think he'll be surprisingly competitive, as per most people's expectations, but I do expect Nelson to get it to the ground and either win with strikes or a submission from top position.
Quick observations. I think Santiago is a really super legit and a super underrated fighter.
Yes.
Excellent striker, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt himself, so I was not that surprised that fight was as even as it was. As far as your observations on Gunnar's striking, as far as like the karate pose thing, to me it's kind of show versus go, because as you're coming up in competition, he's been able to show a lot of the flashier shit and it looked good. But to me, he's got to be able to. I don't think even he knows if he can implement that style yet against the top level guys. I think Story's a real good measuring stick to see if he'll be able to. With Story, I think he's like just the classic wrestle boxer. He's also a good guy who shows how far you can go with just simple mastery of the basics. He does nothing flashy. My last comment is, to me, it was huge when he threw those leg kicks against Ebersol, because we were saying, if anything, he just needs to switch it up a little bit. He's really good at his core competencies, but he almost becomes predictable from a range and strike selection standpoint. That being said, I don't know, man. To me, who do you guys think deserves to be the favorite in this one?
Nelson,
yeah.
I would even maybe I'm just way too big on like guys like Story who are experienced and have fought the top guys. And even if he lost to some of them, to me, that's more valuable than really not having excellent potential and not fighting a bunch of top guys. Regardless, Gunnar Nelson's the favorite, minus 320 to minus 340, and Ricky Story's the underdog, plus 250 to plus 280. Just personally, that's a little steep for my taste on that one.
It is probably a little steep. I mean, I think the big thing for me is you look at the guys that Story has lost to, and a lot of them are guys that they are right around Nelson's level. Are guys, maybe like Mike Pyle or like Martin Kampmann. Guys that have that mix of wrestling and grappling and striking. And the guys he's beat, Eversol, Mulhern, Jardine, Mafra, recently. We're talking recent Story.
I mean, he also decisively beat Johnny Hendricks.
Yeah, but that's 4 years ago now.
Anybody who thinks that fight should have gone to Hendricks, I think. I think that fight was decisive.
But that's 4 years ago now.
It was like one takedown. I would just argue that for what you just mentioned, Zane, that's similar style, and maybe it's splitting hairs, but I wouldn't put Gunnar on the status of those guys yet.
Well, he's
Mike Pyle and Kampmann; those guys are, perennial contenders, pretty much.
Gunnar's, wiggled his way into the top of the division. So whether you want to put him there or not, that's certainly the level that he's fighting to.
Is it though? I mean, this is really his first big test, right? Either way.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is like that's the level he's climbing to as he goes up the division. I mean, this will be the test to see it, but. I mean, saying I don't put him there yet, I mean, it's kind of like, well, that, that's just not, like, that's a very show me once it's happened, then I'll say it kind of thing.
I'm not sure I understand, but either way.
I'm saying that, when he wins, if he wins this fight, then you'll be like, oh, no, he's totally there. And,
Well, yeah, but that's just my point.
I'm saying that
he's on the cusp of either being there, and to me, all those other guys have mostly fought and lost or beat legit higher level guys, and this is Gunnar's like very first.
This is his get over. This is his get over fight. This is I'm here. I'm in the.
If you're expecting him to get over, then the expectation would be that he's that good.
Well, I don't think a get-over fight implies that we expect him to get over. The get-over fight, I mean, I do.
He's there once he proves it.
I'm not saying the get-over fight implies we expect him to get over, but I'm saying if you do expect him to get there, if you do expect him to win, like I do, then it's not unreasonable to expect that the guys that Story has classically struggled with, guys like Mike Pyle or Martin Kampmann, are the same kind of guys that is the same kind of challenge that Nelson can provide.
All right, we went 15 minutes over on card number 1, just for your internal.
Let's run straight to the bottom of this next card.
Which we will. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving on to Fight Night 54. Rory Mack versus Saffiedine from Nova Scotia, Canada. This is going to start off 2 scraps on UFC Fight Pass, 7 o'clock Eastern. Why don't you guys, let's do a combo prediction, even if you guys want to, feel free to mention everything or nothing. Actually, tip that towards the nothing end. Someone go first. Pedro Munoz from Black House versus Jared Sanders, and Matt Dwyer versus Albert Tumanov. Who's up? Who wants it? Who's got it?
I'll take it. Munoz should win. Tumanov should win. These are both pretty one-sided showcase fights for very talented, singularly talented fighters against guys who are not that great. Dwyer is big and aggressive, but technically vacant, and Tumanov is a very good technical striker. And Munoz is just actually a very talented fighter. He's becoming a much more talented striker and is a very good wrestler and grappler, and Sanders is just kind of a wrestler. So I don't see either of those being drastically tough fights to predict.
Connor.
Same prediction. I mean, 2 guys with blue names on Wikipedia against two guys with black names. It's a crude method, but if you're gonna play the odds, I guarantee you probably about 60% of the time the blue name wins. I'm going to say Pedro Munoz is just a very solid prospect, got a very well-rounded game. I mean, he went in there and he was competitive with Rafael Assunção. What more can you say about an up-and-coming bantamweight that he was able to be as close as he was with a top 10, top 5, top 3 bantamweight. You know what I mean? Assunção is one of the very best in the world, one of my favorite fighters. So I was really impressed with that performance. And then aside from Munoz, Tumanov and Dwyer, I think of the two of these matchups, Dwyer has the better underdog chance to win. He's got some decent names in his records, but like Zane said, they're mostly wins built on just being bull strong and being really big, and I think that Tumanov is pretty crafty. I wouldn't be completely shocked to see Dwyer walk away with the win. Tumanov hasn't really impressed me like I expected him to, but I think he's got a much higher ceiling than Dwyer.
Well done, gentlemen. Those are the two Fight Pass cards. We will then make the swap to Fox Sports 2 at 8 o'clock Eastern. 4-piece undercard. First up, Patrick Holohan versus Chris Kalades. They should call him the Scope. 6 sentences or less. Connor Rubish, do the damn thing.
Was Patrick Holohan the guy on our last show that we were corrected on Twitter when we said he was not impressive, and then he wrecked Josh Sampo?
Yes.
Because
that debuted as a featherweight and looked really, really good, right?
Bantamweight.
Bantamweight.
Flyweight. No, he debuted as a flyweight.
That's exactly what I said in the first place.
You said featherweight.
UK guy, right? Good hands?
Yeah.
Irish, SPG Ireland.
And what happened is the reason we picked against him is because he had a really long layoff before that last fight, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
He has like a 2-year gap between bouts, and almost exactly a 2-year gap, just 2 days shy, and yet he came back and looked much better than he did in his first run. I think he's pretty obviously the smart pick here. They're basically just trying to give I don't know. I'm not sure why they would put the Canadian fighter against him. Doesn't really make sense. What's that?
Short notice.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Kalades
Week notice for Kalades.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Patrick Holohan. I mean, he really impressed me against Sampo. Like Zane was saying earlier, the SBG Ireland gym churns out really technically sound offensive strikers, and Holohan is no exception. And he's got some tricky submissions and good MMA submissions. He's fast to jump on the back and he's fast to throw up his hips and either get the submission or escape when he ends up on the bottom. So Holohan's a pretty easy pick here.
Did you talk about this, Zane?
No.
Quickly,
Kalades isn't very good. He can't do anything. He doesn't do anything all that well other than wrestle when he's already on the ground and transition when he's already on the ground. His striking is better when he sits on his punches, but he tends to be kind of a tentative kickboxer in general, and Holohan's just going to wreck him.
Oh, shit. Betting odds. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. All right. Where are we? What fight are we in? Who's fighting?
Yet?
No, let me just catch up in that regard, Zane Simon. Pedro Munoz, big favorite, minus 385. There's only two betting odds for each of those. Jared Sanders, this is the Fight Pass prelims. Underdog plus 265. Tumanov is the favorite, minus 260. Matt Dwyer, underdog plus 180. Holohan is a big favorite, minus 300 over Chris Scope Kalades, plus 220. Up next, Jason Sago, Paul Felder. Literally 6 sentences or less. Zane Simon, your turn.
All right, this should be a pretty competitive fight. Felder's not bad. He's a well-rounded, kick-heavy guy who has a pretty decent sort of ground-and-pound game. Sago is a bit more technical, is a better kicker, has a much better transition wrestling and grappling game, but it's a very close toss-up fight. I'd give the nod to Sago, but only just barely.
Dude, that was beautiful. I'm seriously complimenting you. That was concise. That's what we're looking for. Compact. Connor, he just set the bar high. Go.
I think the trick is to make your sentences as extended as possible. That being said, I'm going to say that this matchup, like Zane said, is very competitive. To me, it basically comes down to who has the better nickname, and that's Paul the Irish Dragon Felder.
Is he the Irish Dragon?
Yeah.
He is. It's not Irish, but whatever.
How can it be a good nickname then? Actually, I just don't want to interrupt that beautiful flow that you guys just did. That's what I'm talking about. Minus 180 for Sago, and Paul Felder is plus 140 as the underdog. Up next, Connor's boy, Jake Lindsay versus Olivier Aubin-Mercier. Did I say that right?
Yeah, probably.
Olivier Aubin-Mercier, probably some goofy shit like that.
No, mine was better. Connor, go.
I learned my lesson last time that I picked a Jake Lindsay fight. Was way too favorited towards him. This time, however, I think he has a much more solid chance of winning. I don't really know. Olivier is exactly the kind of guy you expect when you see somebody pre-UFC with a super heavy submission record. I know I say this shit all the time, but Lindsay's just craftier, and I think he showed in the Tuck fight that he's pretty tough and is able to pull out some unexpected shots on the feet, and he's a solid wrestler. I'm kind of thinking what we'll see is Lindsay winning this one in the clinch because he's got some good knees there. Zane Simon.
I got to go with Mercier here. I mean, I would like to see Lindsay win just for Connor's sake. He's big, he's strong. He's got unusual power that seems to just kind of be natural to his frame. Like, he definitely just seems to generate. I've seen him generate some knockouts that are just kind of like out of nowhere. But I don't. He doesn't have any one part of his game that's very technically well refined. And Mercier's got a big judo background, and when he's not fighting somebody way, way bigger than him, which I mean, Lindsay's bigger, but I don't know that he's bigger to the. Well, I mean, I guess even Chad LaPriest wasn't bigger, but I guess I should say when he's not fighting somebody that can stay away from him, and I don't think Lindsay can stay away from him. I think Mercier can drag him down, and I think he'll win.
Aubin Mercier is the favorite, big one, minus 400. Jake Lindsay coming as the underdog, plus 280.
I mean, you got to say Lindsay's worth a bet at those odds. Right?
Oh, yeah. Lindsay, it's a much closer fight than that. Mercier shouldn't be that big a favorite over anyone. He's undersized, and he's one-dimensional.
I can't understand why he would be that big of a favorite.
Because he was on The Ultimate Fighter?
He's on The Ultimate Fighter, yeah.
And Lindsay lost his UFC debut. That's all I can see. But to me, Mercier is just like tentative on the feet. He's pretty solid with his takedowns, but he doesn't really set them up or go for them often enough. I don't know. I see this as a much closer fight than that.
Yeah, and I have nothing against Mercier whatsoever. It's just weird that he's such a huge... they both came in.
They were calling him, like, going into The Ultimate Fighter, they were saying, like, oh, this guy could be the next GSP and stuff like that. So he was, like, really hyped going into that.
Could be just because he's coming out of TriStar.
Well, the TriStar Jim was saying it. This is, the point.
There you go. Either way, this is going to be a firecracker. Heading up the Fox Sports 2 preliminary card, which starts at 8 p.m. Eastern, Darren Krooksank versus Anthony Njokuani. Connor, I'm feeling you on this one.
This is a fun fight. This is a really fun fight. One that I didn't really expect to see. I guess I kind of forgot Anthony Njokuani existed. He's not exactly looked great lately and everything. And against Vince Pichel, he really just kind of shit the bed. I mean, I guess give more credit to Pichel in that fight. Pichel did exactly what he should have done and beat Njokuani up and completely outgrappled him. But I think Njokuani's got a solid chance of winning this. I like his more technical approach to fighting. Krooksank is really, really fun. He's incredibly dynamic, but he's also all over the place. A lot of his setups for kicks come when guys just kind of back straight up, and that allows Krooksank to just kind of fall forward in his combinations and launch himself bodily into these spinning attacks and everything. It's not a good idea against Njokuani. The last person who launched themselves head first towards Njokuani ended up being like a Roger Bowling-shaped stain on the floor. It's just not a good idea to run towards somebody who can throw those kind of counter kicks. And I don't know, Krooksank is like everything big all the time. Like even his jabs are like big flashy attacks. And I think that really showed against Masvidal, who's very much a little things kind of fighter. The little details, little adjustments on the feet, little small punches. Krooksank lacks those. And Njokuani does not. His only problem is that he tends to be kind of inactive and just allow fights to be given away. So if he does that, Krooksank could easily be active enough to win, but I also see Krooksank being too reckless to fight somebody like Njokuani, who's got a very tight Muay Thai and boxing-based game.
They're almost like opposites, where Njokuani needs more momentous strikes. He throws everything quick and orderly and technical, and Krooksank's the opposite, where he throws everything highlight reel style.
Yeah.
Zane Simon.
Well, Njokuani did lose last time out, so I guess he's got to win this one. That's just kind of the way he fights. But honestly, I mean, I think that really, I think this is a matchup. It's unfortunately got to be determined by Njokuani's aggression. And if he's not aggressive, Krooksank almost certainly wins, because guys that just wait on him on the outside, that is the biggest thing that fits into his style, because he's so unpredictable that it becomes very hard to be defensively sound against him at range when you're giving him lots of space to work. Whereas guys who, if you can crowd him, if you can get inside like George Masvidal did, like John McDessie did, if you can get inside and you can just stay in the pocket and work him over, he's very beatable. So I don't know that Njokuani has the style to do it. I gotta give this the slight lean to Krooksank, but I certainly know that Njokuani could do it if he takes the opportunity and initiative.
You know, Krooksank is actually a pretty solid wrestler. Not huge, but for a guy that with his kind of striking, he's a very good wrestler. And to me, that should be the ace up his sleeve here, because most people are understandably so looking at this as a straight-on striking versus striking match. But Krooksank has the ability, especially with how unpredictable he is with his kickboxing, to change levels and put him on his back. And to me, that should be what seals the deal for him. But the odds are pretty much just how Zane was seeing it. Krooksank minus 180. And Njokuani plus 140. Moving on now, this would be the first fight on the last portion of face punching for the evening. Fox Sports 1, 10 o'clock Eastern, Mitch Gannon versus Roman Salazar. Who wants?
Fill me in here on what happened. Did Rob Font fill in to be Gagnon's opponent, and then
Aljamain Sterling was
right.
initially going to be the fight. That would have been fucking amazing. And then Sterling pulled out, and we got Rob Font, which was still good. That was still a good fight. Mm-hmm. And now we get Roman Salazar. And since I'm talking, I might as well just say that Gagnon is going to crush Salazar into a jelly and spread him over some fine poutine, and that's going to be the end of this fight.
Can you be more specific?
Yeah, Gagnon is one of the strongest guys at 135. He's crushingly powerful, not just with his hands, but with his submissions and with his grappling. He's just one of those guys who not only has a lot of power, but knows exactly how to use it and when and where to apply it. And Salazar is a very... he's a kickboxer that depends a lot on his ability to get inside on single strikes and to get into the pocket and try and land things. On the outside, he's very flighty, he's very light on his feet, doesn't put any power on anything, and it makes him really predictable and really easy to counter, so he gets hit hard a lot coming in. And he's otherwise not a very good wrestler. When he gets to the ground, he's a decent controlling ground fighter, but he's going up against somebody who's much more technical and much stronger than him. So he's just going to get crushed. He's coming in on a week's notice. So
Connor, all Gagnon.
Yeah, I've got to go with Gagnon in this matchup too. He, you know what I remember most about Gagnon is the fight with Dustin Kimura, where he just showed what a tough bastard he is, because Kimura hit Gagnon with a body shot that like crumpled him up, and then Gagnon just decided, I'm going to hit you 6 times in the liver too. It's just kind of like this tit for tat. So, you know, Salazar is not a bad fighter, but he's just not ready for somebody who has that kind of, you hurt me, I'm going to hurt you twice as bad mentality, plus the kind of athleticism you need to succeed in the UFC. I would just like to end this analysis with the unflattering point that Roman Salazar's nickname El Gallito, while sounding awesome in a Mexican boxer kind of way, translates literally to little cock. Dallas?
Unflattering. That was the perfect... And I was going to say, like, Roman Salazar, when you first hear that, he sounds like a Colombian drug lord. You know, that's a powerful, kind of suave, commanding name. But the little cock, no. Thanks for that extra information, though. That'll come in handy on the betting lines. Gagnon is huge favorite, minus 600. Colombian drug lord, plus 400. That's Roman Salazar. I'm just... up next, Nordine Talib versus Jinglang Li. Oh, no, actually, it's Connor's turn. Connor, do it.
I don't know. I don't care.
I'll
care.
accept that. I'm not like Kid Nate in the point. I will accept that analysis.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Talib. Talib.
TriStar guy.
Okay. Yeah. I was gonna say when you called Connor, I was like, he's not ready for this.
No, hell no.
No.
You need some kind of signal. Like
I don't want to be ready for this. The day that I have a lot to say about a fight between Li Jingliang and Nordin Taleb is the day that my life is officially over. I mean, no offense to these guys, but I just don't. There's no reason for me to care about either of them yet.
Well, I like Talib. I thought he was going to win the Ultimate Fighter for sure. I mean, he's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Hater. I'm just kidding. I don't care.
This is probably just the right next fight for Jingliang to get another win in the UFC. Honestly, Taleb is not bad, but he's kind of one of those guys who, I mean, he seems pretty athletic, but he hasn't really put any one thing together as like, this is where he's going to dominate the fight. Like, he's an okay striker, he's an okay wrestler and grappler. He's just not a dominating fighter at all. And Jingliang, the Leech, he's a pretty crafty, stick-to-itive grappler, and he showed in his fight against David Michaud that his striking has come along pretty nicely. He outboxed him pretty soundly. I don't know. It's not a good fight. I don't really care much about it. Taleb probably deserves to be the favorite just because Jingliang is coming out of China, and that Michaud fight was even a split decision. But Taleb beating Vic Grujic doesn't give me a whole lot of, like, I'm not seeing that and going like, oh. So.
Shit, weird. Sorry, my screen froze for a minute there. So if I lose you guys again, finish the show, make it better. Talib is favored. Talib minus 400. Li Jingliang plus 280 is the underdog. Up next, Elias Theodorou, who actually I'm kind of interested to see him fight again, versus Bruno Santos. Who wants it?
I'll take it, just mostly to say that I'm done with Bruno Santos. I even though it's not supposed to be a care don't care preview, the last time we talked about him, I basically said why I cared about his fight, which is that he learned that his normal stall and do just enough to win style wouldn't cut it in the UFC without like just this insane veteran craftiness of a guy like John Fitch. So I was like, I wonder if he'll have learned from that loss, and he really didn't. Like, I kind of thought he didn't deserve the win with Chris Kamazi. Like, he's still just getting in close fights. It's just not gonna work at this level of fighting. And Theodorou's more of a finisher. He's more fun. He's more handsome. He's got every upside here in this fight. So I'm gonna go with Elias Theodorou, because if Bruno Santos is going to improve, he's not going to do it at this level. He's going to do it where he's allowed to try new things in regional MMA.
Yeah, and Theodorou, that hair. I mean, his hair is Zane Simon-esque. And, you know, Bruno Santos has been kind of a prospect for quite a while, but literally, like, it's not often. A lot of guys are called lay and pray guys. This guy literally will take you down and hold you for the entire fight. And a lot of people expected him to evolve from there, but...
And he can't really do it in the UFC. That's the big problem. Like, he can't do it against this level of fighter.
Yep, and you're not left with much after that. Zane Simon agree, disagree?
Yeah, I think I was the one who, when Connor said, like, oh, well, I'm excited to see if Bruno Santos has improved, I was like, yeah, that's real nice, Connor.
Shut the fuck up.
Dream big.
I fucking told you, Connor.
Zane didn't even say that. He just knows I won't remember, so he's just retroactively inserting I told you so moments into my life.
There you go. I am pretty sure I told you so on that.
Probably.
And Connor, you don't remember, so you can't say shit.
Yeah, but, and I was absolutely wrong. Santos did not improve.
Yeah. So, Theodorou, he's definitely a guy I'm excited for. He seems not only athletic, but he's the rare... You know, he's a rare guy coming off tough who's actually big enough for his division. So he seems like the kind of big, athletic, strong middleweight who can really overpower guys there. And he's showing some nice finishing tools. He's showing like a diverse game that hopefully will continue to grow over, you know, his career. He's pretty young in his career still. And Bruno Santos is just so predictable and not fun. So I gotta take Theodorou here.
Theodorou minus 400, hefty favorite. Bruno Santos, underdog, plus 280. Talk about this one quickly, guys, because after this we have two more, and they do warrant more discussion. This is Chad Laprise versus Yosdenis Cedeno. 5 sentences, Connor, go.
Not really impressed with Yosdenis Cedeno. Oh my God, 5 sentences, 3,000 words. I didn't expect that much from him in his debut against Ernest Chavez. Ernest Chavez, is that the right name?
Mm-hmm.
Against Ernest Chavez, and he didn't really deliver. He's another guy who's like, yeah, wow, he can throw spinning shit, and then you see him against somebody who knows how to see that kind of thing coming, and it's like, oh, he can't land spinning shit. Like, that's just basically the summation of his style. Laprise is just much more of a solid, well-rounded mixed martial artist. And while I'm not exactly high on Laprise, I definitely don't see a lot of upside for Cedeno unless he comes out and shows like an unexpectedly and suddenly improved technical game.
Zane, did Laprise beat Auburn Mercier in the Ultimate?
Yeah, he's the tough nations winner.
I kind of liked him. Not anything amazing, but no one expected him to win, and he was scrappy.
I think, for me, my problem with Laprise is that for a guy who sort of styles himself as a boxer, he's defensively not a good boxer at all, and he has he's not a powerful puncher. So
Reminded me of Josh Neer, which is totally weird, but kind of long, lanky, not the best.
I can see that. I mean, it's just sort of like, for a guy who only boxes, you have no power, and you're not defensively sound. That's not a recipe for long-term success. Still, at the same time, that's basically Ernest Chavez to a T, and Ernest Chavez beat Yosdenis Cedeno just by being gritty and staying in there and outworking him, and I think that, yeah, Laprise could do that. Cedeno has the kind of power and throws the kind of ridiculous shit that he could catch anyone, but if he doesn't, he's not winning.
And he's only got that power for a round. Like, he throws everything 100% for the first round, and then he just fades.
Yeah.
Minus 280 favorite for Laprise. Cedeno is an underdog to the tune of plus 200. All right, solid matchup here. Bantamweights, Brian Caraway versus Rafael Asuncion. Call it. Take it. Claim it. Do it.
I'll take it. This is unfortunate. I mean, this is a great fight. It'll be fun, but it's also probably the sort of another capping point for Brian Caraway in a long history of climbing up the division only to hit a bad capping point. He's still a very, very good wrestler and grappler, but his striking, I think it's stabilized, but it's stabilized as sort of functional. And Asuncion is also a very good wrestler and grappler and a very good striker. Really very solid technically. I mean, the big thing for him, I think the only thing to worry about for him, that we saw this against Pedro Munoz, is that if he had an injury and when he switches stance a lot, when he's out of his opposite stance, I can't remember what his. I think it's when he fights.
He's orthodox and switches to southpaw, I believe.
Yeah, when he fights southpaw, he's really not a very good striker, and there is something to be taken advantage of there. So if Caraway can get in on him when he's fighting out of his southpaw stance and try and land some strikes and shoot and try and control the fight a little, that might be an opportunity for him. But Asuncion was really crafty and really solid, and I think he can match and beat Caraway pretty much everywhere.
Is it me, or do orthodox fighters who switch southpaw, like 80 to 90% of them, either then throw a rear leg kick or a left cross, and that's it?
Asuncion is like Overeem. Like, if he switches to southpaw, you know exactly why he's doing it. He's got a very specific technique he wants to throw from there, and once you pressure him, he's gonna fold right back into orthodox as soon as he can. He's not a southpaw fighter. It's actually my least favorite aspect of his game, because Asuncion is one of my absolute favorite fighters in all of the UFC. I think he's just almost always, no matter where the fight takes place, he's a technical masterclass. His counterpunching is phenomenal. He's one of the most well-rounded guys. He's pretty much the toughest out for anybody in the bantamweight division because he has a way that he can match up with every other top bantamweight competitively. He's a good wrestler. He's got outstanding jiu-jitsu, and his boxing and his kicking as well is really phenomenal. He's got this really kind of strange karate style, kind of like, I'm going to compare him to Kikuno again, but kind of like old Kikuno, where he's got like hands not defending his face, but he like moves his head, and he's got sharp footwork. He's almost like a little bantamweight Machida in the way that he moves around in this wide stance, throws long range kicks, and then just the moment you run into him, he's going to slip a punch and come over with a counter. He's really good at taking angles in his defense. Unfortunately for Brian Caraway, who I like as a fighter, I know he's not really the easiest person to be a fan of, but he's a very good fighter. But he's such a specialist in grappling that that was a Sun Tzu's bread and butter. Like, that's what he started doing before he became the amazing boxer he is now. That's his longest martial arts experience is in pure jiu-jitsu, and it's some of the best in the division. So I really don't see a route to victory for Caraway. It would be the very definition of an upset victory, because it would have to be something that Sun Tzu just has a massive lapse in concentration, and Caraway just has the perfect timing and the stars align and everything for Caraway to even snatch a submission on the ground. Otherwise, it's a Sun Tzu probably by a pretty easy decision.
Tough matchup for Caraway.
Yeah.
The kid's a good wrestler. But he's not the kind of like overwhelming wrestler that can just put anyone on their back. He's got excellent technique, but he has to work hard for his takedowns. He has to cut angles and use a lot of speed and athleticism. And he's also an excellent scrambler, good in transitions. But like Connor said, Asensio started out as a black belt way back in the day.
He's
really
very
rough
much
matchup.
He's very much like Dillashaw in his grappling abilities, but without Dillashaw's like striking power and movement and everything he does well on the feet. Even before Dillashaw got with Ludwig, and we saw when Sun Tzu fought Dillashaw, he can shake off somebody like Caraway, who's an exceptional back control guy. Like, even if he does end up in a position like that, which he sometimes does, he'll shake it off, and then it's not going to happen again for the rest of the fight.
Caraway, in my opinion, is a guy who, when he flashes his hands, you almost know it's nothing more than a distraction for his. Not to be too hard on the guy, but that's what makes it so hard. It's not that he transitions poor from striking to grappling, but everyone knows just that. I don't think anyone is afraid of what he's going to throw out on the feet.
I wouldn't be shocked to see him duck chin first into an uppercut and go to sleep at some point in this fight. Sun Tzu did a good job with those counter uppercuts against Dillashaw.
And if I was Caraway, I would come right into this fight throwing huge bombs, like planning my feet, trying to knock his head off, because no one's going to be expecting that. Caraway's the underdog, plus 200. Asensio is the favorite at minus 280. Our last fight, the main event, the namesake, Rory MacDonald versus Saffiedine. Just again, before I give anything away, I'm going to say wow at the betting lines. I'll let you guys go before I spin mine. Whose turn is it?
I'll take it. I fully expect, based on what you just said, that Rory MacDonald is a prohibitive favorite in this fight, and I fully expect Saffiedine to beat him. I think that Saffiedine stands a really good chance of beating Rory MacDonald. I think he basically troubles MacDonald in every single place that MacDonald has historically struggled, especially because Rory is so much more content these days to strike it out on the feet. What has Rory MacDonald struggled with? Well, he's incredibly front foot heavy, and he stands in this bladed kind of silver surfer stance, and so he gets kicked in the legs a lot, and that's Saffiedine's bread and butter. MacDonald's only answer to being kicked in the legs is to counter with punches or a takedown. He does not check kicks. He just doesn't do it. And I don't expect him to start doing it in this fight. What else have we seen? If you move around and you fight with good footwork and take angles like Robbie Lawler did against him, he has a lot of trouble pinning you down. He's just too patient. He waits for the perfect opportunity. Unless he can get into a rhythm and pressure you and push you around, he's going to get hit. And he's going to get pieced up on the feet, and his wrestling is not as good as it used to be, or perhaps it was just being used against people who were not very good counter wrestlers, whereas Saffiedine is a surprisingly stout takedown defense. So I basically expect to see Saffiedine using his excellent leg kicks, and he has a very crafty way of throwing them where he'll sometimes just throw feeder leg kicks just to kind of see how you react. So if you do check the kick, he's not going to just blast his shin into yours. because he mistimed it. He's going to feel out your defenses first before he starts really laying into them. I also expect to see Saffiedine using his excellent jab. He throws good, tight, straight combinations. He's got really good footwork. He's got solid defense. It's a 5-round fight, and that is Saffiedine's specialty. He excels in main events. So I think Saffiedine will probably give away an early round or two while he gets a read on MacDonald, but I do expect him to win this by decision in the late rounds.
I have to say I agree with all that, yes. And, of course, we're going to let Zane go next, but MacDonald's heavily favorite. And I believe Saffiedine is just a really, really rough matchup for him. To me, Rory had all that success when guys came at him like Condit and everybody, but if someone won't just come into his wheelhouse, he's had trouble mounting his own offense rather than countering. Zane, are we crazy?
I think I came in here expecting to pick MacDonald, just because I felt like Saffiedine was a little too one-dimensional in his game, but the more I think about it, the less able to do that I am. Quite honestly, if I think about MacDonald's performances of late, and almost all of his good performances are based upon his ability to entirely freeze his opponent on the feet and pick at them and just sort of get all the time he needs to do whatever he wants. I mean, that Woodley fight is like the picture-perfect Rory MacDonald win of late, where Woodley just totally freezes up and MacDonald just has his time to do whatever he wants for the whole fight. And when pressured at all, MacDonald has had trouble responding, and when pressured by a good striker, a better striker, he has a lot of trouble responding. And Tarek Saffiedine is technically a better striker, is a more diverse striker, has better combinations, and yeah, I don't have faith in MacDonald's ability to press the fight. I mean, I remember people like talking about his Maya win. It's like, oh, he's back, and it was just kind of like, well, after the first round, Maya kind of gassed, and MacDonald.
And he got dominated in the first round. It's like, Zane, I want to know if you're feeling the same thing as me. You come into this fight, you see the two names, and you're like, yeah, MacDonald's the favorite because he's the top 10 welterweight, and he always has been. But then you actually think about it, and you're like, what is MacDonald's path to victory here? What's he actually going to do better than Saffiedine?
Well, and if you look at all the guys like Rory's highlight reel, or I guess most prominent wins, even though he didn't beat Condit, I mean, he was tuning him up for the first two fights. And then you have Nate Diaz and BJ Penn, and those guys all come straight line. They will walk right into his embrace. So that form of pressure is the complete opposite of what Saffiedine is going to do. So I think based on what Zane said, the way Rory usually deals with standing pressure is just to change levels and put the guy on his back because he's doing half the work for them.
Well,
but Saffiedine is not going to do that.
To deal with pressure, but that's not really the way he deals with it anymore. The way he deals with it anymore is just kind of shut down. Like, it just doesn't.
That's kind of not dealing with it to me. You know what I mean? Do you guys agree that Rory is an excellent defensive or counter fighter because he rose up when people were coming after him, but now that we've seen people kind of respect him in his game and back off.
Dallas, you just vanished for a second. What did you say? Now that we've seen people start to respect him in his game,
people, that means the onus is on Rory to mount his own offense and lead the exchanges. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, I can. I think Rory's pretty solid moving forward, but you need to be a very specific kind of fighter for him to be effective. When we saw Tyron Woodley and BJ Penn, Rory put on the exact same kind of performance against both of those guys. He got them backed up into the fence. He kind of stood in front of him and felt him out with his jab, and that's good. I like when he does that, but those guys were not throwing counters. They were waiting on Rory to make the move, and I think Saffiedine just has the perfect answer to that, which is leg kicks, which Rory cannot deal with, and a jab. And Saffiedine has a very good jab.
Yeah.
And his footwork is solid. He switches stances usually to get out, which gives him a very quick route away from the fence. So I don't really see how Rory can back him into the fence which is where Rory needs to be to apply his pressure. You know what I mean? It's the octagon. It's not a boxing ring. Rory would probably be a really good pressure fighter if he needed to be when there were actual corners to put guys in, but you can't corner somebody in the octagon. It just doesn't happen. And that's how much better has Saffiedine looked since coming to Strikeforce in the UFC than he did in his ring fights back in the day. Those were always very close, and he's basically dominated every single one of his wins since he came to this huge open space that is the octagon or the Strikeforce cage. With given room to move, Saffiedine is very difficult to walk down.
It suits him perfectly, because he has all those angles to work with rather than being able to be trapped in a corner. Real quick, what's the unique, I can't think of the name right now, style of karate that Saffiedine trains in? Connor? It's like Shinishinkai
isn't he Enshin or something like that?
It's like Shinishinkai.
It's a high Shinkai.
That's exactly what I said.
I mean, it's knockdown karate though, right?
I actually, a friend of mine actually grew up with him and trained with him a long time, and used to went through all the same karate training with him and all that, and it's a funky style.
And it works really well for him though, because he's really embraced that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But they compete. Sorry, but they compete under knockdown karate rules, right? Like basically, in application, it's like Kyokushin.
Yes, but you hear Kyokushin much more often. And to me, like when Saffiedine first started, that didn't really exude from his style. And actually, I think it was really smart that he went and trained with Team Quest, because that really gave him a strong grasp of clinch work, defending.
He's a good wrestler.
Yeah, and so that gave him a really solid auxiliary power now, and it could be that's an excellent point, Connor. Now that he's got more open space to work with, to me, it's kind of played out at this point that anyone who comes from a non-standard striking art, anything other than boxing or Muay Thai or straight kickboxing, and uses a ton of angles, immediately we bring up the Machida reference, and it's okay. It's kind of like Sprawl and Brawl with Chuck Liddell. But my point is that is all of a sudden things really started to come together, because he's throwing all kinds of angles. His use of distance and timing makes it really, really tough on his opponent to find a rhythm as far as how can what angle do I attack in? And then once they finally are able to get in close, he's stinging with a punch or a low kick and circling out from there. So what's weird is I was just thinking, I know we've all, like everyone on the panel has agreed, but has anyone ever agreed on a main event that's such a massive underdog before?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
Zane and I both agreed and were wrong about another one, a similar one recently. What was that?
Oh.
There was a main event where we both picked the underdog and we were both wrong. Can't recall. It was like 3 or 4 events ago.
And by the way, Zane,
was it Musashi Jacare?
Yes, it was.
All right.
Yeah, we both picked Musashi. We were both wrong, but
very much.
I don't know, man. I still felt like that one was kind of a toss-up. I think we both said that neither of us would be surprised.
Oh yeah.
But this one, I'll kind of be surprised if MacDonald is consistent enough to beat Saffiedine. I think Saffiedine's only real risk here is that he just gets complacent and he doesn't always fight like he really wants to win. Like he doesn't really care. So, but I mean, it's a 5-round fight. You can afford to give away 2 rounds. And I think that's why that suits his style so perfectly, because if there is a round where he lacks that urgency, there's still time for his corner to tell him during the break, hey, by the way, you need to win this next one, and he will do that.
I will say I think the one thing for MacDonald, though, is that he needs to be feared. I mean, that very much seems to be like one of the centers of how he fights, is that he has to be feared. And if he is, and if he gets that confidence, if he feels like, if he can take rounds off Saffiedine, because Saffiedine is giving him a lot of respect, then he builds a lot of momentum off that.
Good point.
Yeah, and also I think Saffiedine, because his footwork is so incredible, that's also why he's not a big power striker, because he's so light on his feet and he can throw a strike without overcommitting and getting caught and leaving himself exposed. But there are times, I think that's kind of like what you guys are saying, I don't think he can give away rounds, but a lot of times I would like to see him break up from the safe, flirtful, motion, emotive striking, and kind of sit down and really make something count besides a leg kick. And I can see maybe Rory being able to kind of chase him down much more so than usual, because he's not at risk of just, whoops, this guy hit me with a left and it turned my lights out. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to, undersell Rory here, but I am kind of surprised. I walked into this thinking that I was going to be the only one with a half-ass, hunch that Saffiedine was a really bad matchup for him. But so kind of interesting. On that note, Zane, whoever won our Hunt in Story thing?
Nobody won it. The bet was I would win if Hunt did not get taken down even once.
I thought it was just go for a takedown.
What?
I felt like none of it. I thought it was just.
I would win if Hunt got taken down even once. You would win if Nelson won by submission.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, either way, we're calling it a draw. Anyone else? We went a little over on this, but for us, actually, I don't think we did too bad. Final thoughts? Anything else?
No, should be between them. There's a good fight card out of this. There's a lot of prospects to watch. There's a lot
of good fights this Saturday. Like I wouldn't cancel your plans or anything. This isn't like UFC 178. But if you've got a relatively empty Saturday, tune in because there's some solid matchups here. There should be some fun fights.
And at the end of the day, there's something in the old school MMA fan in me that is just reviling the idea of saying anything bad about an entire day of good quality MMA on Saturday. You know what I mean? So, all right. Twitter's at the Zane Simon, at Boxing Bush. I'm at Uncle Justice. How do they give us a like on YouTube, everybody?
Hit the thumbs up below the screen, Dallas.
Zane, what does the thumbs up look like?
Looks like this, Dallas.
Thanks, y'all. All right, my screen's freezing and shit, so you could have gave me the middle finger right now, and I wouldn't have known. I would just have smiled and laughed. But we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for watching. My computer's conking out. I don't know if anyone can hear me.
Smile and laugh, Dallas.
Okay.